All right, we're excited to get the next panel started today and want to thank you for participating thus far. We're looking forward to a great panel on a topic that is a continuation of what we just heard, but as we all know is a key and important topic for all of us in the land use and development world, and that is of affordable housing. So today I'm excited to introduce our panel. We have with us experts on this topic. Right to my right is Abby Ivory. She leads the entity known as Ivory Innovations, and I'll let her explain a little bit about what Ivory Innovations is doing to tackle the topic of affordable housing in Utah, and we'll get to her presentation in just a minute. And then we also have with us Lukas, and Lukas is with a group that is known as the Utah Housing Preservation Fund. And when we're looking for solutions for this topic, a topic that feels like it has so many parts and can be at times unwieldy, it's good to know that there are many different approaches that we can take to addressing the needs we have in the affordable housing arena. And then finally, all of you know Michael Parker. Michael Parker is with Ivory Homes and is at the forefront of these issues. In fact, yesterday I was mentioning to Michael that I happened onto a podcast and I heard all kinds of acronyms and very specific details and facts and all this about the topic of affordable housing. And about 3 minutes in, I figured out it was Michael Parker. And I wasn't shocked. I don't want to confuse him and make him think that I would be shocked to think he was that smart on all those details. But I was very impressed because it's clear that he has studied this topic. And then I just have a small role here today, just primarily to introduce this group. But I just wanted to introduce the topic by stating a couple of items, and that is, when we think about the topic of affordable housing, we have a unique challenge in Utah. Unique challenge because the land mass where everyone wants to live is small compared to the total land mass of the state. We have to, as we heard yesterday, be wise in our use of water so we can maximize it and make sure that we're able to meet the growing demands. But we also have a population that has always been in a growth area, meaning it's heading in the direction of growth, but that was seen even more pronounced in the last 2 years. And so as we think about what the last 2 years have meant for affordable housing, it has really focused and brought to our attention how this is a topic that requires the efforts of all of us. And in my role as a land use lawyer, I'm often just focused on one of the pillars, if you will, of how to address that, and that is how it is we can increase efficiency with respect to processing of land use applications. But as we'll see from today's panel, there's more than just one part to resolving this issue. And so I'm grateful that we have the panel we have. But before we turn it over, I just want to cite just 2 or 3 quick items. There's no doubt that this topic is one that is a bipartisan one. This is fortunately a topic that has people of all parties and backgrounds are in support of addressing affordable housing. I have in my hand right here a letter from Speaker Wilson, and he states this. He leads out on this topic by saying this: Utah is now facing increasing pressures from growth, particularly with housing affordability. We at the legislature grapple at every session and on every interim day with very significant issues and are constantly reviewing new information about how to respond on behalf of our citizens, both those who are here and those who are on the way. And so when I hear that topic about those who are on the way, I'm thinking back to what we may have remembered hearing last year. You may recall that at the Silicon Slopes conference that was held last fall, Ryan Smith, who just bought the Utah Jazz and is becoming an increasingly more prominent person in our community, was remarking to all of these business leaders from around the world about how, in his view, Utah is a startup. So what he means by that is Utah is a small, little entity that is going to grow into a very large entity. Now, the one quote that I'll offer here is this. He said, well, we're currently, over 3 million? And in his view, Utah's destined for over 20 million. Now, a lot of us might fall on our back to hear that, but it's important to think about how when you have these people who are innovators themselves and they're talking to other innovators, that's their perspective, that a lot of people are going to be drawn to this part of the world because of the opportunities that exist here. And one of the things we need to make sure is that the opportunities are available to all, and affordable housing is part of that. So without any further comment from me, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Abby, who can talk a little bit more about Ivory Innovations. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to start off actually with a little video because we usually like to use video assets so you can better see some of these things that we're working on. So Madison.
The idea of the Ivory Innovations really came in 2017 as I was surveying the market and really thinking about where things were going and what was going to be the big next crisis or opportunity or challenge. It made me think back to 2006 when we were one of the early identifiers of what was a housing market that was oversupplied. In 2017, we had a housing market that was undersupplied, and it seemed to be developing into a crisis. It's a big problem because not only do we have this gap, but there's some other fundamental things going on in the economy that's very challenging for housing. You see incomes rising, but the price of housing rising much quicker. In the past, these have been problems that have been most acute in the coastal areas, and now it's hitting cities all over America. And so the question was, what are we going to do about it?
We started Ivory Innovations with the mission to catalyze innovative solutions in housing affordability. Since 2017, we have grown our initiatives to work with an increasing number of stakeholders, including entrepreneurs, students, industry experts, researchers, nonprofits, policymakers, industry practitioners, social impact investors, and capital providers. We have 4 goals underpinning our work: to connect and learn from the industry's foremost experts, researchers, and practitioners; to inspire and seek ideas from the next generation; to source and support the best entrepreneurial solutions in housing; to experiment and put innovation into practice by implementing the innovations we find in actual projects. These 4 goals all support our mission of impacting and improving housing affordability through innovation and collaboration. One of our initiatives, the Ivory Prize for Housing Affordability, specifically helps us identify the most promising solutions in the areas of construction and design, public policy and regulatory reform, and financial innovation. Since we started the Ivory Prize, we've evaluated hundreds of organizations working on housing issues. We look to private companies, nonprofits, government agencies, and anyone with a great, scalable idea to make housing more available and affordable. And we bring together the key players who are changing this industry and provide them with the platform and resources to grow.
The past year has illustrated the scope of our challenge. The run-up in prices fueled by the pandemic buying frenzy led to, in some cases, a decade worth of appreciation in a single year, pricing many first-time buyers out of the market. Add to that all of the supply chain challenges leading to unsustainable cost increases and an extremely tight labor environment. And then what came next? A racial reckoning in our country that further exposed the deep-seated and vast disparities in housing. What we need now is a fresh, new approach, new solutions that can have an impact on housing affordability across our country. And focusing on the entrepreneurs, the innovators, and even listening to our students can teach us a lot about what we can do and must do next. Sharing those ideas is what the Ivory Prize is all about.
So I run a group called Ivory Innovations. We're actually based at the University of Utah, and what the video is explaining to you is we care a lot about bringing together a lot of different stakeholders. I want the city planners talking to the academics. I want the developers talking to the city planners. I want like all these people in the same room so that we're actually solving problems that are existing in the real world. And I think, one way that only happens when people start talking to each other. And so we, in the video, it referenced something that we have called the Innovations in Housing Affordability Summit, and that recently was hosted up at the University of Utah this last week. We get a lot of academics in from across the country and a lot of practitioners that are willing to challenge ideas. I had a really awesome debate on stage about manufactured versus modular housing with an academic that was very steeped in this idea that manufactured housing is the solution, and doesn't want to give space to modular. If you don't know the nuances between the two, they're very similar, like off-site construction. Manufactured housing is like trailer trailer parks, but it's been improved, and it absolutely could be a huge part of the solution. And what we do is we focus a lot on what the solutions are. What is something that is out there that's driving innovation in our industry, and innovations that are driving affordability specifically. And so, like the video said, we have 3 different issue areas, or like topics that we're researching under. Those include finance, construction and design, and then public policy and regulatory reform. And these are things that we look at across the country. We have a fairly established advisory board of people who are well known as experts on this topic. And they're from the Joint Center of Housing Studies at Harvard or the Urban Institute back in DC that are helping inform us on the things that they've been seeing, and we actually have spent a lot of time informing them on what's going on in the industry. And it's been fun to be from a little state like Utah that, to Ryan Smith's point, is growing and growing, but we have such an impact and an influence on the national level. And we get a lot of outreach from people that are trying to solve this problem everywhere, because this is a problem that exists, in California, but it also exists in Utah. And if we are going to grow and have 20 million people in this state, we need to do a lot of things differently. And so one thing we want to do is we want to make sure that Utah doesn't become the next California, right? And so we go out there and we are looking at all these really different, innovative, awesome, amazing ideas. But then we spend a lot of time thinking, how do we bring these ideas back to the state of Utah? And so currently we have a few companies that we've worked with. So the Ivory Prize was referenced, is awarded annually. We look at about 200 companies a year. We talk to all these entrepreneurs or these nonprofits or these public policy leaders, advocacy groups, and we figure out what's going on, and then we'll end up awarding a $100,000 grant, one $100,000 grant each category, so $300K. And then we have a top 25 that comes through this process, and that top 25 group is a group that we continually work with. And so we have 100 companies or nonprofits, etc., that are in our little cohort, and we talk to them very regularly. And we spend a lot of time, how do we bring you guys to Utah? We consult with them, and we do a lot of different things. So I just wanted to go over a couple of ideas that have been brought to the state of Utah. One of those is a choice lease program from a group called Home Partners of America. They're based out of Chicago. And they're changing rent to own. They want to change that title to lease purchase. It feels less predatory. There's a lot of things when you're trying to change things up. But we've looked through all their contracts. We look at a lot of different people who are trying to do rent to own type of solutions. This one specifically is actually really helpful because it targets an 80 to 120% AMI group. And so they're trying to help people who are lower income, who maybe probably wouldn't qualify for a traditional rent to own or lease purchase option, get into housing. And as we have seen, and you guys have all seen, I'm sure, talked about, rents have risen in an insane way, especially in the last few months. We have just seen, the prices of homes going down, and rents are still going up, 25% in the last couple of years. I mean, it's just this is a lot. And people, one of the solutions or areas that we have really zoned in on the last couple of years is how do we help renters, with wealth creation? How do we help this specific group that is unable to, own a home? Because we know that owning a home is the #1 path to wealth creation historically in the United States of America. But how do we help someone tap into that as a resource? And so rent to own is a way that we can do that. It's probably the simplest way in everyone's mind. But there's a lot of other different financial solutions that are working on that. Landed is another group that we brought to Utah. They run a shared equity program. So essentially, they're buying into your down payment with you, and they will share in the upside or downside when you eventually sell the property. And so there are also a lot of groups doing this, but we spend a lot of time researching, again, trying to find those that are most buyer friendly, that are most affordability facing, in that mode. And then, there's another group called Rock USA that we've helped as they've been establishing some things in Utah. They actually help people who live in mobile homes or mobile home communities purchase the land underneath their homes. And for us, this is a big deal because if you know about manufactured housing or this specific space, it is really hard for these people to gain wealth because they don't own this land. And when you buy a manufactured house, it's like you buy it with a chattel loan, which depreciates like your car would depreciate in value because they don't own the land. But if you help them purchase the land that is underneath their home, then all of a sudden they have a state, like they have a stating process, and they can actually like increase their wealth through that. And because they all own the land as a community, it's a co-op, it actually helps maintain rents at very low levels. And so it's one of the only solutions that we've seen that is increasing home buyer equity and like wealth and everything else while like maintaining rental prices. And they're pretty awesome, and they have, I think, a handful, they've helped residents purchase a handful of like mobile home parks in the state of Utah at this point, which is awesome. So all these things have kind of been coming through our process. One thing that we have also realized as we've gone through this process of like innovation, how do we help people understand, do something new? You guys all probably know that contractors hate trying something new, and that people who are going in and they're, inspecting your home, they hate inspecting in a different way. And, anyone who's doing any of this stuff, they want to do the same thing they've done for the last 30 years, for the last 100 years in some cases, that has been done. And it's really hard to push that. And so one thing we've done to solve that is we actually have an operating foundation that we've raised money into. The operating foundation is responsible for building affordable housing units, but it's also responsible for building them in an innovative way. And so what we like to do is take something that we've seen that has had a hard time gaining traction, has had a hard time with implementation, and try to implement it in some of these affordable units. And so we have a new product that's being used right now in this situation. It's called T-Stud. It's a different type of stud that it can be used, and it is super environmental. It actually is not driving down costs initially. It's the actual stud costs $1 more than a stud that you're going to be putting in your home or in any home that you're building, but over time there is a massive amount of energy savings for the tenants that go in those homes. And for us, that's a really big deal because utilities are one of the biggest issues for people who have issues paying for their housing. Like the first flag that you'll see that they're having a problem with home payments are that their utilities will not be paid. And so if we can like pull down that cost, it's actually a huge deal for us. And so that's one thing that we're looking at right now. We've also been looking at a bamboo solution, a group called Bamcor. They have like a panelized bamboo product that's a replacement for lumber. And with lumber prices like getting jacked through the roof, and now they're like, they're all over the place. Now they're not quite there, but this was an actually very interesting alternative to think through. Can we get a global supply chain going for bamboo in a way that it's replacing lumber, traditional lumber? Because if you use bamboo, it has a 5-year lifetime to maturity, whereas like if you're using traditional lumber, the lifetime is like 4 to 5 times that. To like grow some of these trees that are being used, and so it's very sustainable and interesting. And so we kind of, a lot of builders have hesitated in pulling in these products, and so that's why we wanted to create an environment where these companies feel like they can test it, and if they get picked up and they're working and things are going, then we're hoping that by leading the way in that, other builders or people will follow and be able to kind of pick up on innovative practices if we've already sat in the room with the inspector for 10 hours talking through why this works and what they should do differently and if it's okay, and training people up on that. And so those are a few things that we really care about through Ivory Innovations. And then our last thing that's a little bit separate is just a really big push to help students or the next generation enter this industry and like come up with amazing new solutions. Because everything has been so stagnant for so long, we do have a belief that the next generation can change the way things have been done, and they can come up with really creative, awesome new ideas. And so we run a program at the University of Utah, a course specifically on housing affordability, innovations in housing affordability, and then we also run a student internship program, and our favorite program is the program called Hack a House, and it is a 24-hour hackathon for students to come up with a solution to the affordability crisis. And we could pick, like this year we had different categories specific to homelessness, environmental challenges, renter-focused solutions. And so we let students compete in this process from across the country. We usually get a few hundred students. This year we had 21 different universities participating in the US, and these students that win are coming up with amazing new solutions that we want to help implement. And so we'll end up talking to them and working with them as they try to start their own startup, which is difficult, but the University of Utah actually has a pretty good structure for entrepreneurial solutions, and so we plug them in and we get it going, and so we really think that that is a big part of the solution as well. And so those are that's a breakdown on Ivory Innovations. That's what we're doing. Those are some of our main focuses, and I think is Lukas next. So, and do you want your video first? Okay.
Utah is facing a severe housing shortage and affordability challenge that requires new and innovative approaches to keep affordability in reach for many Utah families. Rising prices are affecting every household in Utah, and the overall shortage is creating instabilities for families statewide and reaching crisis levels for many low and moderate income families. Many affordable properties are being sold to out-of-state investors that displace tenants and raise rents, which creates a loss of affordable rental housing that is difficult to replace. As costs for new construction continue to rise, preserving existing affordable housing stock is one of the most effective steps we can take as a community to address this growing crisis. The missing link for our state's affordable housing efforts has been a preservation fund. A housing preservation fund purchases affordable rental properties with the intent to improve living conditions while maintaining affordable rents. The Utah Housing Preservation Fund has a unique model that allows nonprofit housing experts to partner with philanthropic foundations, social impact investors, community-centric banks, and others to develop solutions for preserving affordable housing that are innovative, replicable, and scalable. Units acquired through the fund will be managed by the Utah Nonprofit Housing Corporation, which will coordinate with housing authorities, service providers, and others to secure stable and healthy housing for individuals and families most at risk. And because the UHPF model includes an impact investment from Intermountain Healthcare, it creates a link between housing stability and positive health outcomes for residents. In its early stages, UHPF has been able to preserve nearly 400 affordable units, and we've set our sights on preserving thousands more across the state in the years to come. Ultimately, these efforts are defined by the collaboration of partners and creative solutions to community challenges. We invite you to join us in protecting and preserving affordable housing to ensure that everyone can thrive in our state.
Awesome. I really like how that video gives a good summary. One thing I want to mention we're really excited about is we've nearly doubled the number of units that video says, so we're going to need to update that soon. As well as partnered with so many other great local organizations. But I just wanted to kind of give my highlight here. If we were part of the Ivory Prize, we would fit right into that finance group that's focused on renters. And we really focus on low to moderate income, from 30% of the area median income to 80%. But really, the Preservation Fund is very unique. It's something that I believe is the most unique and innovative housing fund in all of America, not just Utah. And preservation as a strategy specifically is something that I think is a little bit overlooked and not talked about very often. Recently, we've heard about it a little bit more. But I wanted to talk a little bit of why it's so important. Here in Utah, in the next 5 years, we're looking at 6,600 units that are currently affordable that will be losing their land use restriction. So they have the potential to become unaffordable if purchased by a market rate investor, and we've been seeing that so often here in Utah. It is one of the major reasons why we are currently in such a hard place when it comes to affordable rental housing. One of the things I think is important to highlight here that the fund was focused on when it got started was not just the fact that affordable housing is being lost in the rental sector, but also that the tenants are displaced. And I think of it as a small little equation, and it's if we lose affordable housing stock, and then we have displaced tenants that are looking for affordable housing, we've increased the demand and lowered the supply for affordable housing, which just creates the problem and makes it so much worse. It's so much harder to build fast enough for affordable housing in order to keep the affordable housing stock. So what the preservation really does is it comes and fills that gap. gap of the leaky bucket, you could say. We're pouring affordable housing in, but there's a hole in the bottom. It's all coming out. We're trying to plug that with the Utah Housing Preservation Fund. Some of the really interesting factors of preservation that makes it so impactful is the fact that if you're going to go build new low-income housing, it's going to take you, a 1.5 to 3 years, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. But for purchasing and preserving affordable housing, it can take only 3 months. The impact is almost immediate on affordable housing. And then as we looked to create this Utah Housing Preservation Fund, we tried to look at the best practices across the entire nation of what were people doing in preservation funds, understanding what the best practices were and bringing them here. And one thing we noticed that all preservation funds had in common is they had a timeline where if they bought a property, in 10 years, that property was going to be sold. And it wasn't necessarily going to remain affordable after it was sold. So they were kicking the can down the road slightly. And we decided we could level that up. We could do different, we can do better here in Utah. And so when we started the Utah Housing Preservation Fund, we decided that we would be an evergreen fund. And what that really means to us is that we are going to purchase these properties and we are never going to sell them. So all the properties that come into the preservation fund are additive to the affordable housing stock forever. We hope that we'll see them 100 years from now in that housing stock. And that way, all the profits too come back to the fund and go to purchase more affordable housing for the future. The fund will be self-sustainable because of that. And that is one of the biggest differences between us and all other funds in America that are focused on affordable housing. Another big highlight I wanted to point out is that we are a public-private partnership. The state of Utah, Christina Oliver mentioned it, the state of Utah had great support for the Utah Housing Preservation Fund. And with that, we went out and we had private foundations, charitable foundations, community-oriented banks, private companies here in Utah that care about the community, all come in and contribute capital, and more than double the amount the state has given the fund. And with that money, we were able to actually lever that further, use real estate loans, and be able to make a bigger impact here in Utah. One of the big highlights on that is that we actually will be able to, the fund has set out to actually make a $1 billion impact in preserving affordable housing throughout Utah. And this is only possible through amazing partners. The fund has not done it all on its own. It's done it through partnering with cities, it's done it through local government, it's done it through private companies that do care about the community, through community-oriented banks. And one of the main things that we really are looking for is to join our efforts even closer with local governments, local cities, municipalities that also care about their communities and don't want to see the same thing happen where tenants are displaced and all of a sudden their rental properties are all so expensive that nobody can live there. That is a school teacher, that is a police officer, the firefighters that they need for the community. And so we're really reaching out to work with local municipalities so that they can help in the rehab in these properties, because as we rehab them, we're able to maintain them long term because of the revolving fund that we have created. I think these major solutions that Ivory Innovations has come up with, along with the Utah Housing Preservation Fund, they're all bringing these solutions to Utah specifically. One of the things I've actually loved is Ivory Innovations. They brought so many companies through their Ivory Prize into the limelight of affordable housing or of just housing in general, that the Utah Housing Preservation Fund now has a source where we can go and actually see these companies that work in conjunction with the Preservation Fund to make a bigger impact on those that we serve. And they also help the fund in general. One of those I'll just highlight out is Isuzu is a company that helps renters increase their credit score by paying their rent on time. The fund has now implemented that into our properties, and it helps our tenants grow as well as it helps us to know the impact that we're making on those people. In the end, I think by utilizing a lot of the resources that the Ivory Prize has brought up, as well as the Preservation Fund's very unique structure, it's made the Utah Housing Preservation Fund the most innovative housing fund in America, and I hope that we can continue with the support of Utah and all of our other local governments to make this big impact in each of the local communities.
What an amazing day for the University of Utah. I want to welcome all of you here this morning for a groundbreaking and an announcement of a truly innovative housing project. So the first thing this will do is just serve the basic needs. With 552 beds, this will begin quickly to expand the capacity of living here on our campus. The second thing, the students that commit to live on campus have much, much better educational outcomes. The third thing that this does is it begins to show us a way as a model project for how this campus and how we can build a university town right here around the University of Utah. And finally, through innovative financing and much of the generosity, again, of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and Clark and Christine Ivory, all of the proceeds through a 99-year land lease, all the proceeds from this real estate project get donated back to students. That amounts to $1 billion in student aid over the 99-year history.
It is so critically important, not just for the economy, not just for our workforce, not just for the goal of being educated, but for the good of the people of the state of Utah, for the good of the people of the world, to make sure that we have access to education, which means housing.
The University House will be an elevated living environment in which students will build a culture focused on academic achievement and life success.
We wanted to produce an ongoing gift that would create ongoing student support. This is why Christine and I are going to kickstart things by donating the $6 million from our foundation to help Taylor's efforts to engage more students. Over the 99-year lease, we figure that more than 50,000 students will live here, but more importantly, more than double that amount will receive scholarships, housing stipends, and internships. In conclusion, I want to tell you my very favorite thing about this project. It is our goal to make sure that at least 25% of the students in Ivory University House will come from the most financially challenged families across the state and across our city. We can't wait to see them flourish.
We want students to feel at home, and this is what we do best. We build homes. The Ivory University House is a place where the spiritual life is respected, the academic pursuit is supported, the psychological needs are addressed, and the physical discipline is expected.
We intend to be part of this community and to continue working to make it better and better, and particularly to bless this place with great students that will be strong in their commitment to helping their community.
Thank you for being catalytic in your relationship to provide opportunity in a way we've never seen before, at least in the state of Utah, but likely anywhere in the nation. This is a project that is perpetual in nature. This is 99 years. And I will hope that there'll be a groundbreaking in 98 years to renew this project and keep it going. Something else that this place will do that we haven't necessarily talked about is that it is going to inspire the people who live here and the people who come into its sphere to think about what perpetual and catalytic projects they will create. They will have built into their not just their educational experience, but their hearts and their souls and their relationships. A community, a place of wellness, a place that has invested in them in a perpetual way. It's about the people who will be affected here. That's remarkable.
We're busy. I can't say enough of how special the project that you just saw with Ivory University House is. First, let me just note, it's the largest single affordable housing project in Salt Lake City's history. 660 beds that will be 80% AMI for students. In addition to that, 25% of the students, as Clark noted, will get additional housing support to make sure that our most vulnerable students are able to live on campus, because we know when they live on campus, their academic and life success go way up. So we want to help and support those children specifically. And then lastly, the net proceeds from that project, showing the power of real estate to generate an annuity And that's really the innovation behind Ivory University House. There's nothing really special about an apartment building that generates rent. It's that we did it in such a way with a 99-year land lease with a great philanthropic partner. The family was willing to seed with the equity. So there's, in addition to $6 million to get this going, we put up $20 million in equity to seed the actual construction loan. So it's $26 million. That's hard and innovative to find. In addition to that, we're focused on mental health, student counseling, wellness centers. We're housing the Ivory Innovation Team up at the Ivory University House, so incubating this idea of social impact inside of housing and really focusing on next-gen solutions to housing affordability. We want to make sure they all come out of Ivory University House. So that's the first one I'm just excited to touch on. The second one just is the overall Ivory entity's level of effort to housing. So we do build and sell housing. Chris is back there folding his arms, and his name's probably said more than anybody today, but there's a lot of people at Ivory Homes focused on building just regular houses for regular people, and we're excited about that. This is a hard market. I'm sure many of you are working through it. A lot of us are working long hours to get through it too. But at the same time, we have an incredible commitment and level of effort to housing affordability through that. So while we are selling to the market, we're trying to shape the market. And we're trying to make sure that the market moves in a way that we all can live and afford to build and live here. We live here. We're a Utah company owned by a Utah family. We aren't the Nationals that you're watching right now who cut their prices $100,000 across the street from someone they just sold the house to for $100,000 more. We're not going to do that. So there's a big commitment both on the market side, and a big bridge to that is our workforce housing initiative. So specifically, over the last 5 years, we've committed since 2018 to set aside 560 to date ownership units for essential workers, civil servants, firefighters, teachers, cops. No government mandate, just have sprinkled them into our developments across the last 5 years. 560 families we've been able to help with that program. Really awesome. Really great partner in South Jordan City came to us and said, that's pretty cool. Let's level it up. Can we contribute? Can we find ways for you to do that and serve 80% AMI families that work for the city? We care about them. We want them to work in our city and live in our city. What can we do together? You know what? We built 54 units on, Chris, 5 acres, 6 acres. The infrastructure costs are way better when you do that density. We got ownership units, there's rental units on that site, there's single family detached, there's towns. It's an awesome little neighborhood, and we had a great partnership. Thanks Ryan and Team South Jordan for figuring out an innovative way to work with us. Part of that, what that was innovative, is the conversation itself. They walked into the room with an idea of saying, how do we help? And how can I, like City Attorney Ryan, how can I think creatively about our use of funds? How can I hand those to you as the developer and wash my hands of some of the things I normally would have to care about? But if I get them in your box, innovation takes place. That was a great partnership, great innovation. The last one I just want to touch on and turn back to you, Wade, is what Abby talked about with the innovation project. So a unique ability of our trade base, our sub base, our partners, our financing partners is our ability to flex. And so now we have an entity to flex into in terms of a nonprofit status. Our first project will be in Lehigh. It's part of a master plan, again, an ability of us to flex where we had a master plan zone. We got density. We've allocated some of that density to the foundation. Wouldn't be able to do that outside the Ivory apparatus. That project will be more than 200 units with 180 of them at least 80% AMI, 40% of them at 60% AMI. That's the single largest private affordable housing project in Utah County. And it doesn't have a single dollar of public money in it at this point. Katie, I'm working on it. What I'm saying is we are going to make a big, big commitment around capital A affordable housing. We're going to make a big, and have made a big commitment around attainable and affordable housing. We're going to make a big commitment about regular people and normal Utah housing. And I would just say, we're busy, we love to be busy, and we love great ideas, and I invite everybody in this room to bring a good idea to our team. We'll flex with you, we'll find a way to put it into action, And we love making a difference on this issue. So thanks for letting us be here and share some of what we've been busy with.
All right. Well, we've got about 10 minutes or so. What I'd like to do is ask the panel just one more question each, and then turn it over to the rest of you so that we can get some input from this group. Because when you really think about who we have assembled, I mean, this is very much the group that is at the forefront of this issue. We're the ones who are either developing or helping facilitate development and taking projects through that process. So I'll start with a question for Abby. Abby, what would you say is the most promising idea in this topic on affordable housing that's coming to Utah?
That's coming to Utah, most promising. We have a couple of really interesting ideas that are coming. Yeah, and so Michael and I are on the same page right now. One thing that we've really been working on is like modular housing offsite construction, bringing that to Utah. So a way that we can drive down costs is by moving some of the, production offsite. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can do panelized construction where you just do the framing offsite and you crane it on site and it's like goes up really fast and you save some money doing that. Then there's like where they're building full modules and then setting it. So we've actually been talking to 3 different modular panelized construction companies on bringing them to Utah as an option for some of the builders here to make it building faster and potentially more affordable. And most of these guys are very focused on affordability. And one of the things that we're really excited about in that side of it is looking also on like a regulatory environment, like I was saying, working with the inspectors, working with like the state on regulations so that this is a friendly place for modular housing construction, and it is a place where these people want to locate factories, because if we are going to grow at the rate that we need to grow, we do need solutions like this to help us. And automation, we have done years of research on all this stuff, and like the number one trend in housing construction and design is automation. And like if we can kind of capitalize on that, like by being able to bring a factory to a smaller state like Utah before we start having some of these larger issues, I think it would be really incredible. So.
All right. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, Lukas, give us a short answer on short or long, detailed or not, what would it take to really take the preservation fund to the next level? What kind of thing would help you to expand your reach?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of things that will bring us to the next level. But what comes to mind is I think Christina Oliver and the workforce, Department of Workforce Services. They all these cities, we've created an affordable housing database. This is all in the process. I think one thing that would be great is I know that there's affordable plans in each of the cities that are kind of being developed. They're being looked at, they're being created, and we would love to be a part of that conversation. We think the fund would be a perfect integration into that and helping bring some outside funds to the city to be able to help the affordability in the long term. And so being part of that conversation, working with the local governments here in Utah, all the cities, we want to be across all of Utah, and we're not there yet. We are, we're trying. And so having this conversation will help us grow into your city, and also hopefully help you achieve your goals of affordable housing in the city in a sustainable way without hopefully making people angry and dealing with NIMBYism even. And so this is one thing I think would help the fund really level up and hopefully help each of the cities that we work with.
All right, great. Well, so watch for Lukas afterwards. Get his business card or his V contact and see what he can do for your city. Any last comments or thoughts you want to share with us, Michael, before we turn it over to the audience?
No.
Okay, great.
My 2 kids, my 3-year-old and my 7-month-old, get excited that I get excited about housing. And I would tell you, it's really interesting. I mean, you guys are sat through CLE for a day yesterday and today and tomorrow, and it can become monotonous and tiring. And then you go to the capital A affordable crowd, and it's so sad. It's just so sad. And then you go to the city meetings, and it's just, you guys hate everybody. And developer meetings, they're all mad at the cities. I love being around this side of the issue because it's solution-oriented, it's positive, it's entrepreneurial, it's Utah. It's who we are. Take this energy. This is what we do to solve the housing crisis. We get after it, we get excited about it, we do it our way. That's my final comment.
Okay, I'll open it up to comments or questions from the group. And one of the things you can start thinking about while the first person raises their hand is this. How how would you answer this question if you're sitting in a city and you have either elected officials or lay officials like a planning commission asking you, what kind of product type should we have only in our city? And, what kind of answers would you give given the things that we've just talked about here? What kind of considerations do we have to have in mind? Not all cities are in the same position. Some cities are greenfield and are dealing with growth in a different way. But this is an issue that touches all cities because redevelopment is such a huge part of answering this question. So as you think and ponder on that, I'll open it up for questions. Go ahead, Lynn.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments. I applaud and admire all of what you described, and I think that's a wonderful beginning. One of the challenges that we have faced in this arena is when we have discussions about bringing down the cost of housing, whether that's regulatory fees or modular units or whatever it is, one of the challenges, how do we make sure that that savings gets translated to the purchaser rather than just producing a lower cost unit that then gets sold at market rate? And how do you make sure that even if we do give that savings to the purchaser, it doesn't just get flipped to a market rate within 30 days? I don't know if you've thought about that or if you have any help. Is it restrictions on transfer? Is it a regulatory fee? Or I know there's a lot of legal tools and regulatory tools, but I'd be interested in how, if we can reduce the cost of producing the product, how do we make sure that translates into the benefit for the ultimate purchaser and the homeowner?
I think two quick thoughts for me. The first one is we are in such a world of hurt that microdosing this and looking at a single project and be like, why is the price on that single project not changing the curve is crazy. So if you're holding the development community to that standard, it's going to be a bit. If it's from a cost structure or per unit as we build new, I think you're finding things like the T-stud element or innovations inside the actual construction stack, because I don't think people understand a lot of the run-up in the cost of housing over the last 3 years is our costs. Like our costs, our labor costs, our hard costs, our development costs, they're all rising pretty rapidly too. And so finding innovative solutions within the existing construction stack is a huge thing what Abby's and her team's focused on. And so to conveying it, I would tell you, we've got a massive market failure. And to get A to B at scale means we have to solve the market failure. But on individual transactions, when we did a deal with the city, those are deed restricted units. They're 4% amortization of appreciation per year. They can't leave 2 years into the deal. Even if they leave, they have to be a city. We made it as hard as possible to sell that house. But even in our workforce program, we ask you to sign an agreement that says you won't move for 2 years. I mean, there's ways to accrue some of this affordability and ensure it moves down the line. There's also ways not to freeze up the market by doing that, and that's probably the balance we need to be thoughtful of. But I would just say we've got a long way to go, Lynn, until you can literally see the connection.
Yeah, and I would also say this is like the number one thing that I think about when we're talking to people, right? Which is why I'm saying like, okay, this is a rent-to-own product, but this is something that we've actually sat down with these companies. Like I've sat down with 15 rent-to-own models, and who's trying to make more money off of this and who's trying to do this in a way that's actually benefiting like a low-income population. And so I can help you identify that on like a lot of these things that we've looked at, but it's such a hard question for me because it is like, okay, we can pull down costs because we're bringing in this like low-cost bamboo solution as an alternative to lumber, but does that pass to the end buyer or is the developer making money on that? And it's hard. And so I think about this a lot, and I just, we try to find entrepreneurs that are really focused on affordability, and that's like one way that we end up rewarding those entrepreneurs. We try to bring those specific entrepreneurs into the state of Utah in like to help with the private side of things. But what Lukas is doing, that being able to like have an evergreen fund that's like a housing preservation fund that is actually holding homes perpetually in affordability forever potentially. That's something that we haven't seen, and we learned from a lot of different models on how to do this actually, but we see all these things like a state or a city will be really interested in a housing preservation fund, but like the cutoff is 10 years because the investors have to make a return. And if we can try to figure out solutions that are more like this, I think that's a really interesting way of helping. And there's a lot of different policy solutions I think that can be pulled in that maybe save government's money, but are also helping with the affordability crisis. One that comes to mind immediately is something in Washington, D.C. they tried is called DC Flex. They're trying to help the group of the population that's like on the edge of getting evicted because the cost of each homeless individual is actually extremely high. And so what they do is they actually put in 8 to 10, it's going up to 10 this year, but they give $8,000 to families and annually as like a flex, so they could dip into this $8K if they couldn't pay their rent or do whatever else. And they only had as much money in their bank account as their rent payment, so that they could use that if they needed it. And they just found that no one really used, like they use a little bit more, but like by giving people like 8 to 10K, then they're all of a sudden preventing this cost. Like a cost of someone who's homeless in California is like 100, and in DC as well is like around $120,000 annually. And so giving someone $10,000 annually seems to be like a really awesome way to change that solution. Yeah, so like we have a lot of different interesting solutions that are like this, but they're not directly related to developers and stuff. But it's the best question because I think about it every day.
Let's get the front row right here.
Yeah, 2 questions related. How has the use of ADUs at Ivory Homes changed the last 3 years, where you were 3 years ago, and ADUs where you are now? So my question is, where was Ivory Homes 3 years ago in the use of ADUs with your single-family homes? And then what role does ADUs play going forward in affordability?
So I think it's a really illustrative question to kind of the connection to Abby's world. So 4 years ago, we found a group called the Alley Flat Initiative in Austin. 2 moms who essentially cared about affordable housing figured out ADUs and alleys, changed their ordinance, got a bond, essentially just got us really into the ADU world. We said, what can we do in our business with ADUs? And so 3 years ago, not a lot. If somebody asked us for a mother-in-law kitchen in a Met code, we probably did it, but not proactively or thoughtful about it. Now, super thoughtful. Some of the discussions internally for future product types, super exciting. We're mapping every development to code to say, what can we do where with ADUs? If you're a Salt Lake City resident, I would encourage you to reach the Salt Lake City Council right now and tell them why you think doing ADUs is a good idea. But we're also learning that, hey, when you do it at scale, which we're trying to do up in the avenues, it's a different reaction. I mean, even the City Council's interpreting their own policy in a way that's interesting to look at the nuances between. So we love ADUs. We're going to do more of them. We're going to find innovative ways to do them. We hope we have cities to work with us on it.
And it's nice that you can build an ADU in, right? Like if you're building new housing, because it's really hard to figure out financing when you're building ADUs after the fact. And there are a lot of people who are working on that financial solution, and Fannie and Freddie are looking at ways to do that right now too. And they've just kind of figured out a couple of different things, but it's difficult and it's a lot more complex. So if we could build them in initially, it would be.
I mean, I would have not known the guy at Freddie Mac to call about ADU financing, but because of our relationship we did, so now they've built a special program to count the rental income towards your qualification. So part of the cool thing that will happen up in the avenues is you'll get homes maybe 1 to 1.3, but you'll get families that would qualify for 7 to 8 getting into those homes, right? Because they can count that rental income and qualify for a much higher home. So people aren't connecting the value of the rental property to the affordability win, and that you get 2 out of it. You get the rental property, possibly affordable, possibly not, and you also get the ownership win that somebody can get more income out of the property they're on.
Perfect. Okay, well, we have time for one last question. All right, well, we actually only have like 60 seconds, so I'm just going to end with this. And that is, I got this sent to me by Brent Bateman. You all know him, the amazing prior ombudsman and now land use attorney. But he sent me a law from Canada. And usually if someone sends me something from Canada, I just send it straight to delete. But the Canadians have figured something out here. They know how to title a new law up there. First of all, this is the title of the law. It's called More Homes Built Faster Act 2022. So that's a fun name, huh? So, but what I do like about it is it has 4 pillars, and this panel has touched on all 4 pillars, but I think as we kind of leave this session and we kind of reflect on what it is we can all do to be part of the solution, we can reflect on these pillars. One is, this is how you address this situation, and I think they're onto something. Building more homes, so we talked about that. Helping home buyers, talked about that. Reducing costs, talked about bamboo. And streamlining development approvals. So I think it's fair, to Lynn's point, we all hold each other to account, but we all have a role in that regard. So it's good to focus our thinking and our energy on those thoughts. But I really want to thank the panel for talking about this important topic, and we'll go on to the next one. Thanks.